Hey there everyone, Mazrock here, and today we are going to be taking a deeper dive into what is a Session Zero and how it can improve the lifespan of your campaign. Alright, and the first thing we'll be covering today with our Session Zero planning would be to set the setting. So not just, this is my homebrew campaign, or we're playing in Forgotten Realms or Eberron, but to go deeper into the type of game that you plan on DMing. Is this maybe a more grim, dark game, or heroic or mythic fantasy, sword and sorcery, perhaps a game of intrigue, and going further into kind of how you're planning on moving the story forward so the players know what to expect. Because if they're coming in with like a sword and sorcery paladin into maybe an intrigue campaign, they might not enjoy playing that character as much, because they'll have built a personality and a backstory for a certain type of campaign, and you're going the complete opposite way. So if you check on the Dungeon Master's Guide at page 38, you will see all the options that you kind of have there, and sometimes looking through them is actually a pretty good thing to do before you start, so that way you can get an idea of kind of what kind of dungeon master style you're gonna move forth with, because they are very different in the storytelling and the narrative and how you go forward and how you treat the characters as well. So how everything kind of overdevelops or develops naturally. And I have personally brought in certain types of characters and backstories into the complete opposite of what I thought the game was going to be run as, and it just wasn't fun. It's not that the campaign wasn't fun, it was a blast, but I had brought forth the wrong character and the wrong mindset for what was happening. So just something to think forward the next time you guys start talking, so before starting a campaign. So that's always usually one of the first things I bring forth when I start the campaign, but covering a little bit further into a Session Zero would be a good idea. Number two, and this one applies a little bit more to homebrew worlds, but also very important for published settings as well, but it's to talk about the geography a little bit. What location they're going to be starting in, where the players might have been around. Now, homebrew worlds, this is all entirely on the DM, because you've created this entire world where you now have to relate some of that to the player, because, you know, they're not a 1-year-old going into this. Chances are they're, 15 to 25-year-old adventurer, or older, or young, going in, so they'll have seen some of the world, and they'll especially have seen the location that they're in. So it's, in my opinion, it's good having some sort of detailed geography from at least their most recent places of being and where they're going to start, so that way it kind of, sets the player in a mindset where they can move forward, and perhaps like a recent event in the area or something like that. Now, of course, with a published setting, the players could say, well, I'd like to be in like this kind of zone, and like an Eberron would be like, well, I like kind of the wasteland type characters. Okay, well, just look over to the demon wastes. Or if they say, hey, I like swampy or jungly areas, Kabara, shadow marshes, and that way they could look it up and go forward a little bit. But I think geography gets overlooked quite frequently, and it can play an important geography can play a very important part in a character's backstory as we're creating it. So it's something that I don't like to overlook. Another thing I like to do is lay down the ground rules, as well as any house rules that we're going to be optioning ourselves into. Now, personally, as a DM, I have very, very few ground rules. The one I never get any pushback on, but I feel always needs to be covered, because you never know what you're going to get with a new player sometimes, so it's best to just put it up front and just, this is what it is. But no sexual assault, no rape. Plain and simple, it is not topics that I'm going to discuss or allow PCs to kind of move forward with. If it's something that happened in their backstory and they want to work that out, that's different, but as an active role play, not happening. Like, it's not going to occur. And if a player decides to bring that up in a thing, I will shut down, say, not happening. We discussed this. What differently do you want to do here? We can, reverse time few seconds or few minutes back and start new. But at least this way the ground rule's covered, and it's like, well, you never told us that. Yes, I told you, and it's not happening. And then there's also house rules. One thing that very rarely I get, but occasionally I get that new player surprise because they've never played with them before is, but feats, all right, not a house rule, but they're an optional rule. You can choose feats with your characters. Oh man, flanking is an optional rule, and there's quite a few optional rules that I personally like to opt into, but in something like Adventure League I can't. So being forward with that, and what kind of optional rules you guys like to use in your games, so then that way everyone's on the same page, so that way when you first flank your PC and you gain that advantage, because what works for the PCs works for the enemies just as well. They don't get surprised like, oh, we're using flanking rules, I never knew that. That way they'll think more strategically when they go into battle and things like that. House rules as well. I like Unearthed Arcana. I think it's very fun and interesting, and with the the new Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that was announced, I see exactly where it was all going. If you talk to any of my players, they know I've been saying this for a while. There's going to be another big book coming up full of stuff, something like Xanathar's 2.0. And it seems to be Tasha's 1.0, full of everything. I'm very excited for it. And another, a house rule that I personally like at my table, because it can slow the game down, and it's one that Critical Role uses as well, and the very good one. Potions to take are a bonus action, but to give are an action. I like that one. It still remains not a free action where people can just pot up every single round. It does take something, a bonus action, to use, but at the same time will speed up combat instead of just an action, which can really draw that out. Now, if you're playing a grim, dark horror fantasy game where every action matters, and you've kind of explained to the players, there's a very good chance your characters die from long exposure or something like that. If it's just a monster that one-shots you, that's never fun. But if you've explained up front that there's the possibility where the long exposure to these creatures, this environment, or something like that can die, every action matters at that point. So perhaps having keeping the rule as a potion as an action would count. But when you start explaining these things, this is the setting, this is the type of geography that we're going to be in, can really help Rangers as well. Now, usually my campaigns are fairly sandboxy, going back to number 2 here, so you'll get to explore kind of a little bit of everything. But that way it helps move things forward, and everyone's under the same understanding. Now, number 4 can be covered within the session 0 itself, or you can kind of give the glancing over. And that is, so personally, I have a rule where I ask all the players to not talk about their backstories or their characters at all to each other outside of the game. Aside from race and class, of course, you can, keep things simple. But the reason why is I've seen this happen so many times. I'm going to give you guys an example here where somebody gets so excited about this character they've created, and they just throw out the entire backstory, all of it, just and everybody knows everything. But once you get to the first session of the game, the players have nothing to discover about you anymore. You've said everything. So there's no need to roleplay with that character because they know everything already. So unless they're roleplaying current events, there's nothing left to discover. And that takes away so much from the game. And the first time I did this, I noticed that they were hesitant because everybody was all used to talking oh, she's this type and this and this and this. Where they all had to hold back, and they did. They were, they put faith in me, and they did. And the roleplay that came out of it was beautiful. I cannot, some of the big roleplay discovery sessions, if you so would, because it does happen where, you have very, very little combat, and they're just talking about their backstories. Well, one thing I like to do is I like to weave backstories into campaigns. Well, now they're discovering what matters. And perhaps role-playing their backstories to each other starts revealing clues about what's going on. So they're more apt to do it to try and figure out what's going on. So, something you can implement, something you don't have to at all, but it's something that I enjoy doing. And So when we're creating characters at the table, I will ask anything backstory or personality related. Keep it quiet. Message me personally, and we'll discuss that back and forth. But aside from I want to create this character, I want to create that character. You know, I want to play this class and this class, because it's not always fun to have, you know, I'm a warlock of the fiend. Oh, so am I, and so am I. Or, you know, we have 3 barbarians in a party. But at the same time, there are 3 links I'm going to leave down in the description box below. And there are character questionnaires. Some of them are for more modern characters, but you can always revitalize it. And some of them are specific fantasy. But there's stuff that I will send to my players, which some of them have said their homework. Some of them will use every single question and answer every single one and love every minute of it. But it details character creation to a degree you didn't think was possible or even necessary. And like I said before in a previous video, I love big old chunky backstories. I'll read every single one, because seeing what someone else creates through their brain makes me happy. And then being able to grab that and run with it in a narrative and storytelling way, it's so much fun. So much fun. So I'll encourage big, chunky backstories at my session zeros. But yeah, so these are just a few things that you can cover. Depending on how much there is to cover, I've noticed that if you're talking about geography in a homebrew world, your session zero will probably be quite a bit longer. But aside from that, they typically run anywhere from 1.5 hours to 2 hours for me, depending. So aside from that, I stream every Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern. We are currently streaming on Thursdays an adventure creation stream where we are coming up with the Gord Thulu campaign. So far, it's going along really, really well, but it's going to take a couple more to really finish up. It's just about a 1-2 shot, depending on your party size. There's going to be new videos every Thursday on this YouTube channel as well. If you feel like supporting the channel directly, my link for the Patreon's down below with different rewards and things like that you can get. I'm planning on adding a lot to it. Most recently, I put the combat tracker up that I prefer using, which is a round-based combat tracker that you can print out for your game, easily print out for your game. It is the first version, so I'm planning on tweaking it and working it up a little bit more. But if you want access to that, any of my patrons get access to that as well. And yeah, I hope your next campaign is fantastic. You have a great session. And if you use any of these tips or anything else that you cover in your session zeros that I might have missed, leave in the comment section below. I'd love to hear it, because I'm always looking to improve what I can do and what I can do better. Thank you very much, and have yourself a good day.